So much jam-packed into the show tonight. We're going to talk about Josh Fraser and his continued rise at Carlton. Speaking of coaching searches, the latest with Essendon. We're going to talk about Scott Pendlebury's future a little later in the show. But tonight we begin with the story that has engulfed the AFL, the Geelong Football Club, the AFL chairman, Craig Drummond, and also the chief executive, Andrew Dillon. And that is the concussion saga that continues to dominate the headlines. Damo, there are further developments tonight, not just precluding to Geelong, but also broadening to the rest of the competition.
Yeah, we'll get to this in a moment, Sam, but there was an email sent today by Andrew Dillon to all clubs, and we'll get to the specifics of that in a moment. But there's an intent now to wrap this case up probably quicker than would be considered normal under AFL circumstances. And the Geelong Footy Club will, by tomorrow, close of play, have submitted its submission to the AFL regarding its involvement. There's effectively admissions of error already, and there's been apologies attached to what they did do in this Jake Kolodjasny case. And as such, there's going to be a sanction, and I fully expect it now to be heavier than the one handed to the Carlton Football Club over the the matchday condition of Elijah Hollands in May. So I think we're looking at a $75,000 plus as a minimum. It could be as high as $100,000 plus as well, but I expect it to be more on the back of that precedent set by the AFL as recently as May.
And does it involve the rest of the competition now? Like, are there clubs outside of Geelong looking in their own backyard?
Yeah, there are, and they've been asked to do so as part of this email. It's a reminder of obligations that every agreement and arrangement needs to be run through the AFLPA and submitted to the AFL as per the standard player contract. That's ultimately at the core of this story. But there is a reference, Sam, laid in the email sent by Andrew Dillon to clubs today, basically asking them to either come forward or at least flag with the AFL any awareness of any arrangements outside of those obligations. So this is the effective last chance on all these types of waiver agreements that may or may not be out there in the AFL system.
It's extraordinary, Lordo, the news that Damo brings, because it essentially means, and Jimmy, as I welcome you in here as well, that the AFL is worried officially that this is more than just one club doing this sort of deal.
Yeah, they would be. I suppose you ask the question and we see if anyone else comes forward and say they have done the same thing. You hope there isn't. It had me thinking, I just feel for Jake, and had me thinking about it over the last couple of days, and I just wonder if it was a player who was in the top three players at a club, say Joel Selwood, who's had a lot of head knocks, would that have ever been put forward to him? Or is it about that player who's a fringe player in this situation, who I'm worried, does he not play again? His mental health through all of this. So it's a way, in a sense, to people saying trying to help the player, but at the same time, how would they put this to a senior player or not? Someone of the top three nature at a club. What do you think of that side of it? Like, do you think that factors into it? Like, what would, say, Joel Selwood in his prime have said to...
Or Tom Stewart now.
Tom Stewart right now, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good discussion to have, and I think with this issue, there's a couple of competing issues. I know it's one in itself, but Geelong and the AFL could are quite rightly being questioned about the avoidance of proper governance, of course, and process. But really, the word complexity and complex and what you're talking about, Lloydie, shouldn't be a conversation stopper. We should actually be having conversations and having a little bit of an empathy of where the game's at the moment. It feels like we're bogged at the moment regarding what do we do next, because we're trying to move laws and change the rules, and we've got to have the actual proper debate between doctors, managers, players. What do we want the actual game to look like? The fabric of the game. But also, how do we then take some of the risk or the dangerous elements out of it, but still keep the fabric. So I reckon we're in this really interesting situation where, can we strike the balance of health and safety, but still have the actual current game that we love? Because at the moment, we just go, it's too complex, or the complexity of it, and that just mashes it all together. And Geelong did that really well. They made it, it's a bigger, broader issue, when they should be, clipped around the ears, and the AFL as well, for poor governance and, of course, poor process. And then their response from all and sundry was really poor to start with.
Jimmy, I wasn't going to raise this as part of the email sent to clubs tonight by Andrew Dillon, but what you've just raised there about a need to have some framework around what happens in the future, there is a reference to that particular part of it as well. They clearly need to, I think, mop up this Geelong situation that does involve, as you've already outlined on tonight's show, Sam, Craig Drummond, the head of the AFL Commission, who was the chair or president of the Cats at the time in question. And the apology that he made on Saturday and the change in tone of the AFL from the Thursday night statement through to the Saturday and Friday of involvement of a need to please explain from Geelong. So there will be, once they settle on the specifics of Jake Kolodjasny, an industry conversation, Jimmy. And again, I think that will happen inside this year as well.
Yeah, I've got empathy for everyone involved. You know, from the AFL to club doctors and medicos. What would a club doctor be thinking right now trying to enter the game because they love AFL football? You and I have worked with some great club doctors, and I feel for them because they're stuck in a really awkward position. I think the game is trying to inch its way through, but we've got class actions going on. We've got doctors who are being threatened with legal action. But we need to get to a point where players do have agency or right over their body or the way they're going forward. For future players, current players, and going into the future. But we're just bogged. We're just stuck at the moment. But that still shouldn't excuse what Geelong did, which was poor governance.
So if it happens again, sorry, Sam, in that situation, you say to Jake, "We're worried about you." So they either sign him to a standard contract or you delist him. Is it this?
That's going to be the easier outcome.
Yeah.
To not sign up to that player
Which
playing
is what we all kind of thought it was anyway, didn't we?
Yeah.
But we didn't really know that clandestine conversations were happening, where I know that Geelong will say, well, we weren't contracting our obligations out. But in effect, it felt like
But
they
then I
were.
asked, what's the point
Well,
of it?
that's right. Was it to give the doctor at the time, some more comfortability around the situation? I think at this point, the player that you mentioned, Jake Kolodjasny, it is worth reliving what he had to say on part of his concussion journey and his career. This is him on a podcast in November last year.
I think footy clubs have just grown so much in that space as well. Like, I think they handled the management of my stuff really good and got me into a place where I was super confident and in a right frame of mind to go back out and play. Obviously, knowing what's happened to Cage, especially over the pre-season. After 23, when we didn't make finals, I got concussed in that last game of the year and had a few symptoms for a little while there. And just the management over pre-season and things like that was super.
So here's where the interesting part of the debate lies, and I completely agree with you, Jimmy. Like, the poor governance is something that, the AFL and Geelong should have to pay for. But then you've got the player himself, talking about the journey that he's been on, the fact that the club's been on the journey with him, and because you asked the really pertinent question, which is, well, what should he be saved from himself? But we're talking about a player's career here that he has a lot of, to use that word that's been thrown around a lot on the weekend, a lot of agency over. What power should he have versus how much should the club save the player from himself?
Yeah, I think you get ticked off by the game, whether you can play or not. A lot of players are told your career's over and you just have to accept that. And if you're ticked off by the game, you get supported by your club, or that club decides that they're not going to offer you a contract.